Hello, and welcome back to Grave Whispers. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy whispers rising straight from the grave, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away, and let's begin. Story 1, it was a cold night in November, the kind that makes the air feel sharp when you breathe it in. I was 20 minutes from the end of my shift. 20 minutes from going home, peeling off my uniform, and walking into a warm house where my wife would already be half asleep on the couch, waiting for me. 20 minutes from kissing my kids on the forehead and telling myself, like I always did, that I'd be more present tomorrow. That last stretch of a shift can be the most dangerous. You start thinking you're already off the clock. Your mind starts drifting toward home. You stop expecting trouble because you've made it through almost the whole night. That's when the call came in. Domestic disturbance. Reports of screaming, then a loud bang. Dispatch said it was time sensitive. I'd responded to enough of those calls to know what that could mean. Anything from an argument that got out of hand to someone bleeding out on a kitchen floor. You don't assume. You don't delay. You move. I turned the cruiser hard through the streets, lights washing houses and parked cars in quick pulses. The neighborhood got darker the farther I went, like the city had forgotten this area. Streetlights were spaced too far apart. The trees looked like they were leaning over the road. Then I saw the house. I slowed down, not because I wanted to, but because my brain needed a second to register it. The place looked ancient. Not charming old, not historic old, rotten old, like it had been left behind and the world kept moving without it. The siding looked warped. The porch sagged. The windows were dark and filmed over, and the yard was more weeds than grass. There was no warm light inside, no porch lamp, no sign that anyone lived there. But dispatch had an address, and someone had called, and the radio call didn't sound like a prank. I parked, stepped out into the cold, and moved fast up the walkway. My boots sounded too loud on the cracked concrete. The front door was made of old wood maple, maybe, but it was split and soft in places, like water had been getting into it for years. I leaned in and tried to look through the only small window in the door. Nothing, no light, no movement, just darkness. I knocked, hard, and the sound was dead and flat, like knocking on something already hollow. I knocked again, and when I did, my fist went straight through the door. The wood gave way like wet cardboard. Splinters dug into my knuckles. I froze, staring at the hole I'd made. Jesus, I whispered. There was no time to stand around. If someone inside needed help, waiting could get them killed. I stepped back and kicked the door in the rest of the way. The rotten frame broke easily, and the door swung inward with a long, ugly creak. "Police!" I shouted into the dark. "This is the police. Show yourself. I am armed." My voice sounded wrong in that house, like it didn't belong there, like the walls didn't know what to do with it. I pulled my flashlight and switched it on. The beam cut through the darkness in a narrow white cone. Dust floated in it, slow and thick. I swept the light across the entryway. No furniture, no coat rack, no shoes, no pictures, no signs of a life. The floor was bare. The walls were bare. The air smelled stale, damp, and faintly sour, like old water trapped behind plaster. I took a few careful steps inside, scanning corners, checking doorways, listening for any sound that could point me toward the disturbance. Nothing. The house felt empty in a way that didn't feel normal. Not no one is home empty. More like no one has ever lived here empty, even though the outside clearly showed it had been standing for a long time. My stomach tightened. Every instinct in me said this call didn't make sense. I started backing toward the front door, thinking I'd clear the perimeter from outside and call for backup. I turned slightly, ready to step out, and stopped. Something was standing in the doorway behind me, blocking the only exit. At first, in the flashlight beam, I couldn't make out details. Just a tall, thick shape, broad shoulders, massive arms. The kind of build that didn't look like muscle so much as bulk. Like a human who'd been fed too much for too long. My grip tightened on my pistol. Before I could speak, a low voice pushed through the silence. "I'm glad you came," it said. The voice was rough and deep, like gravel dragged over concrete. "It's been a long time since we've been able to find a meal." The words hit me harder than any threat I'd ever heard on duty. They weren't angry. They weren't even excited. They were calm, like someone discussing the weather. My body reacted before my mind finished processing. I stumbled backward and brought my gun up. I kept the beam of my flashlight on the figure's chest and face, but the light seemed to die on it somehow, like it didn't want to reflect properly. I backed up fast, trying to create distance, trying to keep my weapon steady. 10 feet, maybe a little more. Then, my back hit something, not a wall. Something soft. Something warm. My whole body locked. A breath, hot and moist, brushed the side of my neck. I tried to spin, tried to raise the pistol, tried to shout. A heavy impact slammed into the side of my head. The floor rushed up. Everything went black. When I woke, I didn't know where I was or how much time had passed. The darkness was total, thick enough that it felt like something you could touch. My head throbbed with a deep, pulsing pain that made it hard to think. I lifted a hand to the side of my skull, and my fingers came away slick. Blood, warm, sticky, still fresh enough to smear. I tried to sit up, and a wave of nausea rolled through me. For a second, I thought I was going to pass out again. I forced myself to breathe slowly and keep still until the room stopped spinning. My eyes adjusted just enough to make out shapes. Concrete under me, a low ceiling, pipes running along a wall, a damp smell that matched the house upstairs, a basement. I reached instinctively for my belt, my radio, my cuffs, my flashlight, my gun, and found nothing. My uniform. I was in my underwear and a tank top, cold against the concrete air. My duty belt was gone. My boots were gone. My vest was gone. Everything that made me feel like an officer, everything that made me feel safe, was gone. For a long moment, I sat there in the dark and listened. I couldn't hear traffic. I couldn't hear neighbors. I couldn't hear the normal, distant hum of a sleeping city. Just the slow drip of water somewhere, and the faintest creak of the house above me, like the building was breathing. Eventually, I found the staircase. By feeling along I crawled to it, then stood, and took one step at a time, moving slowly because my head still felt like it was split open. I kept my hands out in front of me, feeling for the railing, trying not to make noise. Halfway up, I realized the door at the top wasn't closed. It was open, a thin slice of darker darkness. I stopped and listened. Then, two figures stood at the top of the stairs, blocking the opening the way bouncers block a doorway. They were big, not just tall, heavy, solid, built like they were made to hold things down. One of them spoke, voice amused. "Going somewhere?" My heart dropped so hard it felt like my body forgot how to breathe. A thought flashed through me, bright and cruel. I am not going to see my family. I am going to die in this house, and no one is going to find me in time. I tried to talk anyway. I tried to do the thing cops do, the thing where you make it sound like you still have control even when you don't. "Listen," I said, voice shaking more than I wanted. "You don't want to do this. We can work something out." No answer. Just silence. Not the kind of silence, the kind where they've already decided. I understood then that my words didn't matter. My badge didn't matter. My job didn't matter. In that house, I wasn't an officer. I was meat. And that realization did something to me. Fear is paralyzing until it isn't. Until it flips into something raw and physical. A switch turned in my body, and suddenly I wasn't thinking about policy or procedure or how to handle this the right way. I was thinking like an animal that wants to live. I took my only shot. I bolted up the stairs, screaming at the top of my lungs, throwing my weight forward like I could break through them by surprise. I lowered my shoulder and aimed for the space between them. They grabbed me instantly, hands like clamps on my arms, on my chest. I felt myself being stopped in midair, like running into a wall that moved. But I wasn't trying to win a fight. I was trying to create chaos. Before they could fully pin me, I wrapped both arms around one of their legs, the nearest one, and pulled with everything I had. I twisted my hips and used my body weight For a fraction of a second, it worked. The man's balance broke. His weight shifted. The other one tried to steady him, but the staircase was narrow and their bodies were big. Then we were falling. The top step creaked, and the next second was a series of violent crashes and impacts as all three of us tumbled down the stairs. My shoulders slammed into a wall. My back hit steps. My head rang again. The world became blunt pain and motion and the sound of bodies colliding with wood. We hit the bottom with a sickening thud. I landed on top of them. For a moment I lay there, stunned, waiting for the pain to tell me something had broken. But I could move. I could breathe. I was hurt, but not wrecked. The two men under me didn't move at all. In the dark, I saw a shine spreading on the concrete, a dark pool, growing slowly. I didn't need light to know what it was. Their heads, the way they'd hit, the way their bodies were suddenly too still. I scrambled off them and got to my feet, shaking, adrenaline carrying me even as my head pounded. I started up the stairs again, desperate to reach the open door at the top. I took 2 steps and froze. At the top of the stairs stood another figure, smaller, a child, maybe a boy, the shape of him thin and quiet, standing completely still like he'd been waiting there the whole time. I didn't have time to speak, because the basement door slammed shut with a heavy bang that echoed through the concrete room. Then, locks clicked. 1, 2, 3, more. The sound of my escape closing itself. I shouted and rushed up the stairs anyway, throwing myself at the door, but it held. I pounded on it until my hands hurt, until I realized nobody was coming. Nobody was going to open it for me. I slid down onto the steps, breathing hard. I had been so close. Then I forced myself to think. If my tools were gone, they had to be somewhere. If they were going to kill me, they wouldn't leave my gun lying around, but maybe they missed something. Maybe they were sloppy. Maybe I could find one thing, anything, that could give me a chance. I crawled back to the bodies and searched them in the dark, hands shaking as I felt through pockets and waistbands. I didn't find my weapon. I didn't find my radio. I didn't find my cup. But then my fingers hit something square and hard, a small box shape. My breath caught. I pulled it out, and my thumb found the button out of muscle memory. The screen lit up faintly. My phone. My hands trembled so badly I almost dropped it. I opened it and hit call, ready to dial, ready to hear any voice, any dispatcher, any operator, any living person. The screen flashed a message that made my stomach drop. No signal. I stared at it like if I stared long enough it would change. It didn't. The basement felt colder. The air felt heavier. The silence felt like it was leaning in toward me. I threw the phone onto the concrete and it clacked uselessly, then slid a few inches. I sat down hard, my back against the wall, and for a long minute I didn't do anything. I just let the hopelessness come in waves. I thought about my wife, about my daughter's bedtime routine, about my son asking me to tell the same story twice because he liked the ending, about the small, normal moments I'd treated like they were guaranteed. I whispered to myself that I was done, that I was going to die here, that I wanted it to be fast at least. I closed my eyes and waited for whatever came next, and that's when I heard it. Not footsteps, not voices, not the door opening upstairs. Something softer, a slow, wet sound, like someone chewing with their mouth open. Then a second sound under it, breathing, steady and patient, like whatever was making that chewing noise had all the time in the world. I opened my eyes in the darkness and realized the worst part wasn't that I was trapped. The worst part was that I wasn't alone down. Story 2, I don't know what made me do it. Looking back, there were 100 little chances to stop, to ignore it, to laugh, and move on. But at 9:06 p.m. on a Tuesday, I was bored, halfway sunk into my couch, watching a cable rerun of an old movie I'd seen a dozen times. An ad break started. I cracked open my third beer and scrolled through my phone while commercials for laxatives and life insurance played in the background. Then one commercial came on that didn't match the rest. The first thing I noticed was how old it looked. Not retro on purpose, old actually old, like someone pulled it from a forgotten local TV station archive and shoved it into a modern broadcast by mistake. The picture was grainy, slightly washed out, and the audio had that hollow, tinny sound like it was recorded on cheap equipment. A New England beach filled the screen. Gray waves rolled in under a cloudy sky. Accordion music played softly, and seagulls cried overhead. It had that tourist ad energy from the 90s, the kind that tries too hard to be charming. Then, a sailor walked into frame. He looked like a cartoon version of a fisherman, thick beard, weather-beaten face, a heavy wool sweater, and a faded cap like he'd just stepped off a trawler. He planted his boots in the sand and stared straight into the camera. "Ahoy there, lad," he boomed, voice cheerful in a rough way. "Has the stench of the brine taken the wind out of ye sails?" He didn't blink much. His eyes had a strange intensity, like he wasn't performing for a general audience, like he was talking to one person. Then he raised a blue plastic bottle in his hand and held it up like a prize. "This here is Captain Thorne's lathering wash," he announced. "Avast ye of your foulest odors, and let the force of the sea cleanse your skin." I actually laughed. Not because it was funny exactly, but because it was so weird. He sounded like he was trying to do a pirate impression and accidentally landed somewhere between a children's cartoon and a drunk guy at a seafood festival. He kept going, selling the body wash with dramatic gestures, and I kept watching because I couldn't help it. There was something hypnotic about how out of place it felt, like the TV had opened a door to the wrong decade. Then, the tone of the ad changed. The camera began moving closer to his face. The accordion music faded until it was almost inaudible. The seagulls stopped. The beach behind him blurred. His voice dropped, turning quiet and gravelly, like he was leaning in to share a secret. "Only a chosen few can truly harness the glory of the sea," he whispered. "Fill out my captain's log if you have the mariner in thee." "The tide is rising, lad." ACR code appeared on the screen and stayed there longer than a normal ad would allow, like it was waiting for me. My phone was already in my hand. Without thinking, I scanned it. I told myself it was curiosity. I told myself it was the beer. I told myself I just wanted to see what kind of cheap marketing gimmick this was. But the truth is, the ad had hooked me the moment his eyes locked onto the camera. I wanted to know what the captain's log meant. The CR code took me to a website that looked like it had been built during the .com era and never touched again. Harsh red and white colors. A cheesy lighthouse graphic. When the page loaded, a bell sound played once like a buoy bell out on the water, hollow and metallic. A privacy pop-up immediately covered half the page, and I did what everyone does when they're annoyed. I hit accept all without reading a word. Below that was the captain's log. It was just a simple form, but the questions were strange. Not normal survey stuff, more like riddles written by someone who thought they were clever. Would you rather drift or sink? Would you follow the lantern or the song? If the sea called ye by name, would ye answer? Stuff like that. At first it was kind of funny. Then it started feeling less funny, mostly because the questions weren't random. They were pointed, like they were trying to sort you into a category, like your answers mattered. Still, the novelty was already wearing off. I clicked through quickly, filled it out without thinking too much, hit submit, and closed the tab. That was it. Just a dumb little internet thing. It was getting late and I had work early, so I set my alarm for 5:30 a.m. on my phone, put it on the nightstand, and went to sleep. At 2:47 a.m., I woke up to a foghorn. Not a normal alarm sound. Not music. Not a buzzing, a full blast, ship in the harbor foghorn that felt like it punched the air in my bedroom. Bo-wah! Bo-wah! I shot upright, heart slamming, hands flailing for my phone. The noise was so loud it felt impossible that it was coming from such a small device. Somehow my phone had connected to my Bluetooth speaker across the room, and it was playing the foghorn at a volume I didn't even know the speaker could reach. The sound filled my apartment, vibrating through the walls. I fumbled for the phone and tried to silence it, but the normal lock screen wasn't there. Instead, my display showed some kind of nautical map puzzle. Like a little cartoon boat bobbed at the start of a winding blue river, and at the end of the river was a dock labeled off. I blinked hard, still half asleep, trying to understand what I was seeing. My brain couldn't put it together fast enough. The foghorn kept blasting. Babwash, babwash. I dragged my finger on the screen. The boat moved along the river. I hit the edge of the shore, and the boat snapped back to the start. The foghorn didn't even pause. I tried again. Same thing. My hands were shaking now, not just from being woken up, but from the panic the noise was forcing into me. It felt like my body thought something huge was approaching in the dark. Third try. I forced myself to slow down, tracing the river carefully with my finger. The boat wobbled along the narrow path. My finger slipped once, barely touched the shore, and the boat reset again. I swore out loud. The foghorn hit again, louder somehow. Then finally, on the fourth attempt, I guided the boat to the off-dock. The screen flashed once, and the foghorn cut out so abruptly my ears rang in the silence. I fell back onto the bed, breathing hard like I'd been running. My whole apartment felt wrong now. Too quiet, too still, like the foghorn had been the only thing keeping something away. My phone vibrated. A text from a number with a 207 area code. Time for your watch, Skipper. I stared at it until the words stopped looking like English. Who is this? I typed back. The typing bubble appeared for a second. 3 little dots. Someone there. Then it vanished. No reply came. I didn't trust my phone after that. I set the old bedside clock alarm instead and tried to sleep, but my body didn't want to. Every sound in the apartment felt sharper. Every small creak made me imagine boots on the floor. When the morning came, it didn't feel like I'd actually rested. On the drive to the site, I kept fighting my eyelids. I worked construction management, and that day we were breaking ground on a new project out of town. Permits had been delayed for months, and my company had cut my hours while we waited. Now that approvals had finally come through, the pressure was on to get everything moving fast. I entered the site address into Google Maps and merged onto the highway, trying to focus on work grading schedules, delivery, the list of problems that always show up when you start digging into land that's been sitting untouched. The GP's voice started giving directions like normal. Take the next exit and keep left. In 500 feet, turn right onto Black Creek Road. My thoughts drifted. My foreman had mentioned retiring next year, and if I played my cards right, I could take his spot. I'd been waiting for a chance to show I could handle bigger responsibility. If I could help get this project back on schedule, maybe I could stay straight for the next 10 nautical miles. I blinked. Nautical miles? I looked down at the screen. The route line was normal. The map was normal. But the little text on top of the instructions actually said nautical miles. I told myself it was some weird setting glitch. Maybe I'd accidentally changed units. It didn't matter. I kept driving. Then my headlights swung around a curve and suddenly lit up open black water. There wasn't a road ahead. There was a boat launch. The pavement ended and dropped straight into the ocean like someone had designed the world wrong. Screech! I slammed the brakes so hard, my seatbelt cut into my chest. My tires skidded and stopped just short of the drop. My heart pounded as I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the water a few feet in front of my hood. A small group of fishermen nearby turned and looked at me like I was insane. One of them lifted a hand, palm up, like he was asking what the hell I was doing. I checked my GPS again. It now calmly suggested I make a U-turn and return to the highway. I'd only been driving on that road for about 2 miles. There was no reason my directions should have led me to the water. I had driven out to job sites 1,000 times. I wasn't new to the area. My phone buzzed again. Same 207 number. The sea's a lovely lady, but she's quick to anger. My fingers went cold. I deleted the message immediately, like deleting it could delete the feeling it gave me. Then, I made a shaky U-turn and drove back toward the highway, checking my mirrors like I expected to see something following me along the shoreline. The day at the construction site passed in a kind of forced normal. I did my job, answered questions, walked the land with the crew, talked to the foreman, pretended the morning hadn't happened. But every so often I'd catch myself listening, expecting to hear a foghorn in the wind or that buoy bell sound from the website. By the time I got home, all I wanted was a shower and sleep. That's when I saw the box. A small cardboard package sat on the hallway floor outside my apartment door. It had my name and address on a label, but there was no return address. No company name. No shipping info that made sense. Just my details, printed cleanly, like it had come from a real service. When I picked it up, sand leaked out from the seams and sprinkled onto the floor. My throat tightened. I carried it inside, set it on my kitchen counter, and stared at it for a full minute before touching it again. The cardboard felt damp, like it had been near water recently. I opened it carefully. Inside was sand, not clean beach sand. It was darker, clumpy in places, and it smelled like the ocean up-close, salty, fishy, sharp. Mixed in were bits of seaweed and small shells, broken and jagged, like they'd been scraped up from the bottom of something. It didn't look like a souvenir. It looked like someone had shoveled it straight out of the sea. Buried in the sand was a blue plastic bottle. Captain Thorne's Lathering Wash. On top of the bottle was a note written on rough, yellowish paper like fake parchment. The handwriting was messy, impatient. Like whoever wrote it didn't care if it was "Lather with care, lad. The sea's taken notice of ye." I stared at the note until my eyes hurt. Part of me wanted to laugh again, to call it some prank. But there was no humor in it now. Someone had brought ocean sand into my apartment building. Someone had left it outside my door. Someone knew my name and address because I'd scanned a CR code and filled out a dumb form. And the worst part was the smell. It filled my kitchen. It made my apartment feel damp and cold, like the air had shifted closer to the coast. After a full day on site, I was sweaty and sore. I needed a shower. I kept telling myself I needed to rinse off and think clearly. I grabbed the bottle, mostly because it was there, and because some part of me wanted to prove it was nothing. I went into my bathroom. The second I stepped inside, I caught a faint smell of algae, like pond water in the sun. Then I heard something else, a distant rumbling in the pipes. My building was old. Plumbing noises weren't rare. I told myself it was just that. I turned on the shower. A weak trickle came out, barely more than a dribble. That happened sometimes, too. I tapped the shower head with my hand to loosen it up. The pressure increased. But then I saw something stringy slide out of the little holes. Seaweed, I froze, watching it dangle there like hair. It swayed as water ran over it. For a moment, I honestly thought someone in the building had dumped something into the water supply as a joke. It was a ridiculous thought, but it was the only normal explanation my brain could find. I tapped the shower head. It broke off completely. The metal piece fell and clanged against the tub, and from the open pipe above, ice-cold seawater blasted down like a fire hose. It wasn't tap water. It was salty, sharp, and it smelled like deep ocean. Along with it came more seaweed and small shells. They hit my shoulders and bounced into the tub. The water pooled around my feet, and the shells began collecting by the drain, building up like the tub was filling with the beach. I stood there, naked, soaked, and unable to move. My mind kept trying to insist this was impossible, but my skin felt the cold, my nose smelled the salt, and my feet crushed shells under them. The water rose to my ankles. Then my phone rang from the counter outside the bathroom. I didn't move fast enough. It rang out and went to voicemail. A second later, my phone played the voicemail message on speaker automatically, even though I hadn't pressed anything. I heard his voice, Captain Thorne. "A little gift from the goddess herself, Skipper," he said, like he was smiling as he spoke. Then he chuckled, soft and pleased. "Tide's turning now," he continued. "Crew will be by soon," the message ended. The seawater it splashed against the tub walls and ran out into the bathroom floor, spreading across tile, creeping toward the hallway like it knew where to go. Seaweed slid out in ropes. Shells clattered, building little piles that shouldn't exist in an apartment bathroom. I backed out of the tub, slipping slightly, grabbing the sink to keep from falling. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold myself. I didn't know if I should call the police, call my landlord, call anyone. I didn't even know what I would say. "Hi, my shower is running seawater and a pirate on TV is threatening me." I sat down on the closed toilet lid, soaked and shivering, staring at the tub like it might turn into something worse. Then I heard singing. At first it was distant, muffled through walls and floor, a deep, drunken kind of singing, like men leaving a bar late at night. Except it didn't sound like my neighbors. My neighbors didn't sing sea shanties. The voices grew clearer. I heard boots, too. Wet boots. Heavy steps in the hallway outside my apartment door, water squishing with each step like they'd walked through puddles. The singing stopped right outside my door. For a moment, there was only the sound of seawater pouring from my shower and the low creak of the building settling. Then something scraped lightly against the wood of my door, slow and testing, like a hook or a nail dragging along it. I held my breath. And in the silence between the splashes, I heard someone outside inhale deeply, like they were smelling the air through the crack under the door. Then a voicemail, rough, amused, murmured close enough that it sounded like it came from inside my apartment. "Skipper," it said, dragging the word out. "We've come for your watch." Story 3, I used to be an Olympic track diver, one of the best in the world. It wasn't because I was born with some special gift or because I had natural grace. I wasn't one of those athletes people talk about like they were destined for it. I was good because I was obsessed. I dove every single day, no matter what. If I found one rough edge in my form, one tiny mistake in my entry, I would grind it down with repetition until it disappeared. I filmed myself, watched it back, slowed it down frame by frame, and punished every flaw out of my body. I trained until my muscles learned the movements the way lungs learn breathing. To everyone else, I was exceptional. To myself, I wasn't even close. My standards weren't normal. Diving wasn't a sport to me. It was a religion. And in my head, there was no such thing as good enough. There was no halfway. There was no peace in being second best to my own expectations. I wanted one thing, a dive so clean that the water didn't just accept me, it welcomed me, like I belonged in it, like I could pass through without making the world react. I wanted to slip into the pool with barely a ripple. No slap, no splash, no shudder in the surface. Just silence and perfect control. And eventually, after years of tearing myself down and rebuilding myself into something harder, I did it. I got so consistent that I could make the water look almost still. People clapped. Judges held up high numbers. Commentators used words like flawless and surgical. Coaches smiled like proud parents. And none of it mattered, because I still felt like I hadn't reached the real goal. Not the one I carried in my head. Not the one that kept me awake at night. About 6 months ago, my father died. The funeral got in the way of training, which was the only thing I could focus on at the time. The day was full of rituals that felt pointless to me, standing in rows, shaking hands, listening to people talk about loss in soft voices. People expected me to cry, to look broken, to perform grief the way they were performing it. I didn't want to be there. I was restless, almost angry, like they were wasting my time. It sounds horrible written out like that, but I'm not trying to make myself look better. I'm just telling you how it was inside my head. I had become the kind of person who could only feel alive when I was diving. Everything else felt like static, like background noise. I didn't care that the man who first took me swimming was gone. I didn't care that the person who taught me to hold my breath and not fear deep water was now in a box. I didn't even care that my coach had dropped me not long before for what he called psychological instability, like I was a machine that had started making strange noises and needed to be replaced. I didn't care that my hands were constantly bloody, wrapped in bandages from being scoured raw by chlorinated water and constant impact. I didn't care that my forearms had splints from microfractures I never gave time to heal. I didn't care that I was swallowing painkillers I didn't have a prescription for just to keep training through the damage. I cared about one thing. I had to dive. So on the night of my father's funeral, I broke into the city's indoor public pool. I climbed over the fence and walked the perimeter until I found an emergency exit that wasn't properly secured. The building was dark and silent in a way that felt almost sacred, like a church after hours. I slipped inside and listened for alarms. Nothing, just emptiness and the faint echo of my own breathing. I found a light switch near the pool deck. It looked old, the kind with a stiff toggle. When I flipped it, only one bulb came on, an old filament light that cast a dull yellow circle over the water. That single light was enough. The smell of chlorine hit me, and my whole body settled into focus. My skin tingled. My thoughts narrowed. The rest of the world disappeared like it always did when I got close to water. I stripped down to my underwear right there on the deck. I tossed my funeral suit aside like it was trash, the ugly thing my mother insisted I wear so we looked respectable. I didn't feel respectful. I felt hungry. I climbed the ladder to the high board. Each step up was familiar, a routine carved into my nervous system. My feet were cold on the metal. The air felt stale from being trapped in the building all day. The yellow bulb hummed faintly. At the top, I walked to the edge and stopped. I breathed in slowly. The pool was perfectly still. The light made the surface look like a flat sheet of glass. For a moment, looking down at it, I felt something close to peace. Then I moved. Everything happened in the right order. Arms, shoulders, core, the smallest adjustments that meant the difference between a clean line and an ugly one. I flowed through it like a machine with perfect timing. I jumped. Then I jumped again. Then I dove. Wind rushed past my ears. The world narrowed to that one shining surface. And then there was contact, clean, sharp, controlled, and then the embrace. Euphoria hit me the way it always did in those first seconds underwater. The pressure, the weightlessness, the feeling of being sealed inside a private world where sound was muffled and the body's rules changed. Perfection, this was it, I thought. This was the flawless entry. This was the clean baptism. I felt a strange satisfaction in my chest, a sense that I'd finally done what I'd been chasing. I waited to rise back up, to break the surface and breathe again. But nothing changed. I kicked. I reached out. I expected to feel the pull of the surface above and the solid floor below. I grabbed only water. Then I opened my eyes. It was pitch black, not dim, not shadowy, not the kind of darkness you get when lights are low. This was total black. I couldn't see my hands in front of my face. I couldn't see any glow from the bulb above the pool. I couldn't see anything at all. My first thought was simple. The light must have gone out. So I kicked upward, toward where the surface should be. But the water didn't feel like a pool anymore. It felt deeper, colder, endless. I couldn't tell if I was rising or sinking. There was no sign of a surface, no shimmer, no change in pressure. Just the same cold nothing around me, swallowing direction. I kicked harder. I tried to orient myself by sensation, by the way water pressure shifts when you move, but it was useless. The darkness was complete. Sound was gone too, like the water had swallowed it. No slosh, no splash, just silence so deep it felt physical. The cold began to seep into me. Not refreshing pool cold, not a clean shock. This was frigid and apathetic, like it didn't care whether I lived or died. My lungs started to burn. Then I saw a light in the distance. It was a cold blue glow, small at first. My brain grabbed onto it immediately. The bulb, I told myself. The pool light. Something. I swam toward it with everything I had. My arms pulled through the water hard, my legs kicking fast. My mind focused on that glow like it was salvation. I could feel my breath running out, panic rising, my chest tightening around the air I was trying to hold. The blue light grew brighter, but it also looked wrong. Mottled, uneven, as I got closer, the shape changed in my perception. It wasn't a clean circle like a light fixture. It looked like a hanging orb, pale and faintly cloudy. For a split second, my mind reached for another idea. The moon. That made even less sense, but my brain was desperate for something familiar. Then I swam straight into something solid. It hit me like running into a pole. Pain shot through my shoulder. I flailed back and groped at the object in front of me. It was smooth, curved, taller than I was. Not metal, not wood. Something, a live feeling without being soft. I reached farther and realized there were to the left and right more tall, curved shapes like pillars lined up in the dark. And beyond them, I felt it. Tendrils of temperature, heat, and cold rolling out of some deeper abyss ahead, like a breath from a place that wasn't meant for human bodies. I jerked away, heart hammering. I looked up toward the moon, and I watched it move. It dropped lower, and as it did, it illuminated something enormous above me. A drooping, mottled surface the size of a building, covered in lumps and crater-like bumps, like diseased stone. The light slid across it and revealed two protrusions. Those protrusions ended in glassy, frosted globes. Eyes, then the light sank a little more, and I saw what was beneath them. Teeth, two intersecting rows of massive spiked teeth, layered in a way that made no sense, like the mouth had been designed by something that didn't understand human anatomy and didn't need to. I tried to scream, but I was underwater. I tried to move, but my body, all I could do was float and listen to my heart pounding against my ribs. The creature drifted closer. It moved without urgency, like nothing in this dark place needed to hurry. Its cratered skin brushed against me, and the contact made my stomach twist. It was rough and cold and wrong. The frosted eyes examined me, calm and indifferent, the way a person might glance at an insect trapped in a sink. Then it swam away suddenly, fast enough that the wake tossed me around like a toy. A massive fin passed somewhere nearby, and the water surged hard, spinning me until I lost all sense of direction again. When the motion settled, the darkness returned except for that distant blue glow, far away now. I fought to steady myself. My lungs were screaming. My limbs felt heavy. I needed air so badly the thought of it became painful, like hunger. That's when my feet touched something. Ground, relief shot through me so strongly I almost laughed. If I had ground under me, I could push up, I could jump, swim up, find the surface. But the ground was soft, too soft. My feet sank into it like mud, like flesh. I shifted my weight and felt it give under me, yielding and unstable, as if it was alive in a slow way. Then it moved, not upward, not downward. Sideways, the ground began sliding laterally beneath me like a treadmill, and I had to run to keep my balance. I sprinted across it underwater, arms flailing, legs pumping, trying not to fall as boulders and crater-like shapes rose up in front of me without warning. I vaulted awkwardly, feet slipping, each movement slow and heavy from water resistance. It sped up, faster and faster until I couldn't keep up. My foot caught on something and I tumbled, rolling over and over, dragged by the moving surface. My mind screamed that this was impossible, but my body was too busy trying not to drown. My lungs were at the breaking point. I was seconds from passing out. I wanted to breathe so badly my jaw clenched with the urge to open my mouth and accept death if it meant ending the pain. Then the moving floor smoothed out beneath me, slick and featureless, and I rolled right off the edge. I drifted again, and what I saw made me wish I could drown myself. An eye opened in the darkness, not a normal eye, not even the frosted globes from the creature above. This was an eye the size of a stadium, a round well of dark attention staring back at me in the glow of that distant blue light. I was falling toward it slowly, helpless, like gravity existed here in its own strange way, and I realized the floor I'd been thrown from wasn't a floor at all. It was one of several enormous bodies moving through the water, huge shapes passing like silent trains. Another one approached from the left, its bulk barely visible except for the way it displaced the water around it. I tried to move. I tried to brace myself. I couldn't. Its wake hit me first, slamming me sideways and spinning me until I couldn't tell up from down. Then the impact came. It felt like being hit by a bus. The world shattered into pain and pressure and darkness, and then I woke up on the pool deck. I was lying beside the pool, coughing up water in heavy gushes. Jugfuls, my throat burned. My chest spasmed. I rolled onto my side and vomited water onto the tile until my stomach was empty and my lungs were raw. The indoor pool was silent. There was no one else there. The single bulb was still on, flickering intermittently like it might die any second. The water in the pool was perfectly still, like it hadn't been disturbed at all. It looked ancient, untouched, as if thousands of years had passed since anyone had broken its surface. I looked down at myself. I was still wearing my funeral suit. The suit was perfectly dry. My hair was dry. My skin was dry. There wasn't a drop of water on me anywhere except the water that had just come out of my mouth. I sat up slowly, shaking, and checked my watch. The glass was cracked inward, like it had imploded under pressure. But the watch was also completely. I don't know how long I sat there staring at my hands, trying to understand what kind of reality would allow that to happen. My brain kept trying to force a clean explanation: sleepwalking, hallucination, a seizure, drugs, grief, stress. But none of those explanations fit the weight of what I remembered. None of them explained the cold, the darkness, the impossible distance, the teeth. I quit diving that day. I quit swimming altogether. I haven't gone near a body of water larger than a fish pond since. Not a lake, not a river, not the ocean, not even a deep pool. I avoid them the way you avoid a place where you were almost killed, except I can't even say what tried to kill me. I can't even say where I went. All I know is that something down there saw something huge and old and calm in its hunger. And sometimes I think the reason I survived is not because I escaped, but because it let me go. Like I wasn't worth the effort. Like it was curious and then bored. I don't know if that makes it better or worse. My life is small now. I don't do anything that involves water. I take showers as fast as I can. I flinch when rain hits my face too hard. I break out in cold sweats just filling a glass at the sink, because the sound of water pouring makes my chest tighten. I had a full panic attack in a mall when I walked past an aquarium. Not even a big one, just a display tank in a store with bright lights and little fish, and my body reacted like it was back in that darkness again, like the glass could crack and the water could take me. I don't know if I can live like this. I'm not writing this to sound dramatic. I'm writing it because I desperately need help. And I don't know who you're supposed to tell when the thing that broke you isn't something anyone will believe. I don't know how to explain to a therapist that I'm terrified of water because I dove too perfectly one night and went somewhere I wasn't meant to reach. I wanted the water to embrace me like a disciple. It did, and now I'm terrified it will recognize me the next time I get close enough. Story for it was 1 week after graduation, when we drove out to Silent Waters campgrounds. At that time, we felt like the whole world had finally opened in front of us. School was over, real life had not started yet, and all we wanted was one last trip before everyone scattered into jobs, college, families, and whatever else waited beyond that summer. We arrived loud, excited, and in a hurry. Nobody wanted to waste time. We wanted the tents up fast, the cooler opened, the fire started, and the vacation to begin before the sun even had a chance to move too far across the sky. The place was beautiful in that quiet mountain way, with tall trees on every side, the smell of damp soil and pine, and a lake not far from the clearing that looked almost black beneath the shadows of the woods. We set up camp in a large open space with a fire pit to one side, and that first night we gathered around it, drinking too much, laughing too loudly, telling scary stories, and pretending we were not still kids trying to act grown. On the fourth morning, around 8 o'clock, one of the park staff was almost finished with his patrol when he found our campground empty. Not just quiet, empty. Our tents were gone. Our cars were gone. All that remained were tire tracks leading toward the tree line near the lake, then stopping after only a few meters as if the vehicles had driven into the woods and vanished. 8 days later, Nathan and I stumbled out onto a road in front of a passing car. We were weak, filthy, sunken-eyed, and half out of our minds. We were more than 100 miles from where we had started. When the police questioned us, we told them almost everything. We admitted we had brought more than alcohol with us, I told them I had shot a deer. I told them we had heard people screaming in the woods and that something had followed us for days afterward. But I did not tell them about the scars on the deer. Nathan never told me what he saw under the lake water. Some things stayed buried because neither of us had enough courage to bring them into the light. For years, I never planned to tell the whole story. Silence felt safer. Silence let me build a life where people did not look at me like I was crazy or guilty. I moved somewhere warmer, somewhere with more desert than trees, because I could not stand forests anymore. I could not even drive past thick woods without feeling my chest tighten. Nathan and I stayed friends, but after I moved out of state, I never saw him in person again. He stayed behind. When I asked why he never left, he always gave the same answer. He said he did not want to learn the good fishing spots somewhere else. I knew that was not the whole truth, but I did not push him. We both had our ways of surviving. Then, he called me last week. His voice sounded normal at first, almost happy. He told me his wife had talked him into going camping, and his daughters had been begging him to teach them how to fish. I asked where they were going. When he told me the name of the park, I felt my stomach drop. Silent Waters. I asked him if he was insane. I asked if he had forgotten what happened to our friends. There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. Then he sighed, tired and heavy, like he had been waiting years to say something he knew I would hate. "We were high, Jez," he said. "We ran into the woods in the middle of the night, and the others stayed lost." I could not believe what I was hearing. I started yelling. I asked him if he truly believed that was all that happened. If he really thought Jason, Daisy, and Isaac had just disappeared because of one bad trip. Nathan snapped back at me then, louder than I had heard him speak in years. "Do you really think an urban legend came to life and ate our friends?" Then he softened. That was worse somehow. "It's okay to move on," he said. I hung up on him. If I am honest, I was worried for him, but I was too angry to notice the worry at first. For days, I told myself he had insulted our dead friends by pretending it was nothing. I wanted to call him Monday morning, but I had nothing kind to say, so I waited. It would not have mattered. His family went missing Sunday evening. Nathan was never found. Neither was his wife or his oldest daughter. His youngest daughter was found alive, cowering in a patch of overgrowth, clutching a fishing rod so tightly they had trouble getting it out of her hands. All she would say was, "The lady took them swimming." I think something lives in the lakes of Silent Waters National Park. I am not brave enough to go back. Maybe someone else is. Maybe someone stronger than me can do something with what I remember. That is why I am writing this down now, even though every word feels like scraping open a wound that never really healed. That morning, Isaac had slept in. We had planned to leave at sunrise, but when we pulled up outside his house, he still had not come out. We sat there honking our horns like idiots until his mother opened a window and screamed at us to shut up. A minute later, Isaac came running out with his bag half-zipped, hair messy, shoes untied, grinning like he had not kept everyone waiting. He jumped into his car and followed us down the road. Jason and Daisy led the way in Jason's brand new red pickup truck, the one his parents had bought him as a graduation gift. Nathan, Isaac, and I followed behind in our own cheaper cars, the kind that rattled when you drove too fast and smelled faintly of old fast food no matter how much you cleaned them. We parked at the trailhead and carried our gear from the lot into the campground. The clearing was wide and flat, with trees gathered thick around the edges like a crowd watching from a distance. There was a fire pit already there, ringed with dark stones. To the left, the trees opened enough that you could see glimpses of water through them. The lake was about 100 meters away, still and silent beneath the morning light. We pitched the tents, unloaded the coolers, argued about where the food should go, and by the time everything was set up, the sun was high and we were all sweating. The lake looked too inviting to ignore. The rest of us went swimming to wash off the heat and dirt. But Daisy refused. She sat on the edge with her knees pulled up, watching us like we were ridiculous. We tried to convince her to get in, but she only rolled her eyes. Isaac, being Isaac, scooped water into his hands and splashed her. She jumped up, furious, and yelled at him before storming back toward camp. We laughed at first, because that was how we were then. Everything was funny, until it was not. Later that night, while Isaac was asleep, someone snuck into his tent and poured water on him. He shot out of the tent, cursing loud enough to wake everyone. Daisy denied it, of course, but Isaac swore he had seen someone with long hair running out of his tent. She was the only one of us with hair past her shoulders. I kept mine short, because I hunted, and I hated hair getting in my eyes. The argument did not last long. We were all too tired and too happy to ruin the first night over a prank. Nathan and Jason had caught fish for dinner. They worked together surprisingly well, cleaning and preparing the fish, while the rest of us sat around pretending to be useful. It was the first and only time I ever saw Jason get his hand. He was usually the type to avoid anything messy, but that night he seemed proud of himself. We cooked the fish over the fire, drank too much, and when the sky went dark, Jason asked if any of us had ever heard of the Quiet People. None of us had. He leaned forward, firelight flashing across his face, and told us that when the first settlers came through those mountains, they found stories of tall, human-like things living near the lakes. They wore no clothes. They did not speak. Leaves never rustled when they walked. Twigs snapped under their feet but made no sound. They could glide through water without a ripple and move through the woods without a breath. They ate animals while they were still alive, taking careful bites, leaving the creature to live as long as possible. They rarely left the water, but when they did, they moved fast. Silent and fast. Jason said the settlers had captured one once. It lived for only a day away from the lake. Its skin dried, cracked, and flaked off like fish scales. It died soon after, if it had ever truly been alive the way we understood life. When he finished, Nathan laughed. So fish people creep around the woods? What if we caught one earlier? Isaac laughed too, and soon the two of them were mocking Jason while he insisted the story was real. Daisy told them all to shut up. I sat there listening, amused but uneasy. It was just a campfire story. That was all. Every place like Silent Waters had a legend. Every forest had monsters when the fire got low and the alcohol made shadow. We went to sleep not long after. The next morning, Daisy complained that her tent had been freezing. Jason complained about how uncomfortable the ground was. After that, the two of them decided to sleep in his truck instead. By the second day, I had heard Jason complain about his sore back enough times to make me want to walk into the woods and never come back. So I grabbed my rifle and said I was going hunting. Isaac offered to come with me. He said he wanted to set snares and catch a rabbit, but after about half an hour, he got bored and left. Alone, I moved deeper into the woods. The birds were chirping. The wind moved softly through the branches overhead. The air smelled clean, and for a while the quiet felt peaceful. I went off the trail and pushed into thicker parts of the forest until I found a deer bed in a small clearing. I hid behind a dense patch of overgrowth and waited. About an hour later, a large buck trotted into the clearing. At first, I felt that old hunter's excitement, the sharp focus that comes when the animal appears. Then, I noticed its hide. Patches of fur were missing along its body. It stepped carefully into the clearing and checked its surroundings. I held my breath and looked through the scope. The buck turned its head left, then right, directly toward where I was hiding. It looked straight at me. I do not know how long we stayed like that. I had one eye closed, the other looking through the scope, and the buck stared back as if it knew exactly where I was. It crossed the clearing without looking away, then lowered itself to the ground. Only when it shook its head and glanced away for half a second did I breathe in sharply and pull the trigger. The bullet hit its chest. Its body shook with the force of it, but it did not run. Its head snapped back toward me. It stared at me again. Then it finally slumped onto its side. I stood and walked closer. Its chest still rose and fell with wet, choking breaths. The missing patches of fur were not from disease. Chunks of flesh had been torn from its sides. Its back was covered in bite marks. Some were fresh and bleeding, others had scarred over. There were 20, maybe 30 marks. Most were shallow, but some had taken whole pieces of muscle and fat down to the bone. It looked like something had been choosing the best parts and biting them off a little at a time. I left the buck there and ran back to camp. Nathan was the first to see me come out of the woods at full speed. He ran over, asking what happened. When I caught my breath and explained, he dismissed it. He said maybe an animal had attacked it. Isaac joined in, saying his mother had warned him about wolves in the area. Wolves hunted deer all the time. I wanted to believe them. But the bite marks had not looked like wolf bites. They were too flat, too careful, too human in a way I could not explain. I said that, and Isaac laughed. Stop trying to scare everybody, Jez. Jason's stories are more believable. He gestured to Jason, who had gone quiet. Nathan and Isaac walked away, joking with each other. After a moment, Jason looked at me and asked, how many times had it been? That question scared me more than their laughter. I went to bed uneasy that night and left my lantern on until morning. The next day, Jason and Daisy walked over from the truck and asked me to show them the deer. We searched for hours but never found it. I could not find the clearing again. That only convinced Isaac even more that I had made it up to scare everyone. I tried to tell myself that maybe I had seen an injured deer after hearing Jason's story, and my mind had filled in the rest. I still cannot remember that night clearly. We all drank like we had the nights before, but for some reason, every time I finished a drink, I felt like I needed one more. My nerves would not settle. Isaac handed me something, and I took it without thinking. I do not remember asking what it was. I only remember the fire becoming too bright and the trees behind it becoming too dark. Then the screams started. They did not echo the way normal screams should in the mountains. Each one began suddenly, then cut off, only to start again from another place. At first, there was only one. Then another joined. Then another. Within a minute, there were half a dozen voices screaming around us. Each one sounding like it came from a different animal. Some were high and sharp. Some were low and choking. None sounded fully human. Daisy moved first. She sprang up and ran toward the tree line in the direction of the parking lot. Jason shouted after her. When she disappeared into the trees, he cursed and followed. The rest of us froze. We looked at one another, and without saying a word, we all realized the same thing. The screams were coming from that direction. Jason reached the trees and stopped running. He was still calling Daisy's name when a large hand reached out toward him. A tall figure stepped from the darkness and placed one hand on his shoulder. Jason went silent. He did not fight. He did not scream. He only stood there as the figure bent toward him and opened its jaws. We ran the other way. It was dark, and Nathan tripped headfirst into the shallow water along the lake's shore. Isaac and I grabbed him and pulled him up, and the three of us ran into the trees. Soon we were single file in dense undergrowth, branches slapping our faces, roots catching our feet. The trees grew closer together. The canopy blocked the moonlight. The screams followed us. Every so often, I saw something pale moving between trunks. Nathan was in front, arms stretched out to keep from slamming into trees. Isaac was behind me. I kept looking back to make sure he was still there because I could not hear his footsteps over the screams. We ran until morning. When the sun first rose, I looked back to check on Isaac and almost stopped dead. A tall figure stood only a meter behind him. It was hunched over, its chest rising and falling rapidly. Long, wet hair covered its face. Its skin was chapped and peeling, flaking off to reveal bright red tissue underneath. It made no sound at all. Isaac saw my face and yelled, "Keep moving." So we did. Soon after sunrise, the screams stopped. In the morning light, we realized we had been running uphill. The trees were thinning, and behind us the forest spread in every direction. We saw no road, but nothing seemed to be following us. A river ran from the east, and we headed toward it, desperate for water. All we had was my cell phone, and it had no reception. The battery drained hour by hour while we wandered. Trying to get down the mountain, we reached a steep cliff and had to turn back to find another way. While we walked, I asked Isaac if he knew how close that thing had been behind him. He said he did not, but then he added, "I kept feeling something, like someone blowing hot air on the back of my neck." After that, we mostly stayed silent. Nathan kept muttering under his breath. I could not understand him at first. Late that afternoon, exhausted and lost, we found a small opening in the side of a steep rock face, just big enough to crawl through. Inside was a cramped space, barely large enough for the three of us to lie down. Isaac covered the entrance with leaves and sticks while we prayed it would hide us. I offered to keep watch first. In that tight darkness, I could finally hear what Nathan had been whispering. I could see them. I crawled over and sat beside him. He flinched when I touched his shoulder. I asked what he saw. For a long time, he only repeated the same phrase. Then finally he said, "When I tripped and went under the water, they spoke to me." I asked what they said. His voice broke, and he started crying. I stayed beside him with my hand on his shoulder until he stopped shaking and fell asleep. Later, I woke Isaac for his turn to keep watch. As I tried to sleep, he spoke softly. "Hey, Jez." "What is it?" I asked. He cleared his throat. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you, and that I laughed at you." I thanked him. I do not think Isaac knew how to apologize, so those words meant more than he probably understood. Soon, I fell asleep. When I woke, moonlight came through the covered entrance. Nathan was curled beside me. Isaac was gone. My stomach dropped. I scrambled outside and saw him slung over the shoulder of a large figure. Isaac looked back at me with a blank expression. The creature carrying him was pale, naked, and wet. Its long hair clung to its body. Blood dripped down its back, though I saw no wounds on it. I woke Nathan and half-dragged him out of the cave. As we ran, I kicked something and turned my phone's flashlight down. It was a rabbit. It had been bitten over and over, its fur red and matted with blood. I screamed and ran without checking if Nathan followed. He caught up soon after. For the next 3 days, we barely slept. We kept moving through what felt like an endless maze of trees. We stopped only to drink from a lake or pick berries I recognized as safe. We did not see the creatures again. We did not hear the screams. Slowly, I started to believe they had left us alone. But then, hunger came. My stomach screamed constantly. My throat was dry. The last water we had found was the night after Isaac was taken. In the middle of the night, we saw a light through the trees. We ran toward it and found a street lamp. Then, we reached a road. It was an empty 2-lane highway stretching in both directions. We walked down the middle, praying for headlights. We chose a direction at random and kept going. Then, Isaac stumbled out of the trees and collapsed on the side of the road. I ran to him and dropped to my knees. He stared up at the sky with empty eyes. His clothes were torn, and he was bleeding from several wounds. My mouth began to water. Nathan fell to his knees beside me, and I heard his stomach growl. We tore what remained of Isaac's shirt open. The only thought in my mind was how hungry I was. I looked at his face. His eyes were glazed. Tears filled my own as I whispered, "I'm sorry." I bent down and opened my mouth. Isaac began laughing. His expression did not change. His eyes stayed empty, but he laughed, louder and louder. I backed away. He turned his head toward me, then toward Nathan, who had not moved. Then Isaac's body began sliding backward. I had been so focused on his laughing face that I had not seen the large hand wrapped around his ankle. Nathan scrambled to his feet. We ran and left Isaac there. When I looked back, his body was gone. A few hours later, we were saved. Headlights appeared ahead, and we ran in front of the car, waving our arms and begging the driver to stop. A frightened woman let us in and drove us to a town neither of us recognized. We had ended up in another state. After a week of questioning, the police finally let our parents take us home. The town spent months searching for our friends. We were not allowed to join. Nathan tried anyway. I moved away soon after. Isaac had lived just down the street from me, and I could not handle the way his mother looked at me every time she asked what happened to her son. Isaac had her eyes. He furrowed his brow the same way she did when she was thinking. I never knew what to say to her. I still do not. Now Nathan is gone too, along with most of his family, and his little girl says a lady took them swimming. I do not know what Nathan saw under the water that first night. I do not know what those things said to him. Maybe they convinced him it was all a bad trip. Maybe they let him believe it, because they knew he would come back one day with people he loved. Maybe Silent Waters does not hunt like an animal. Maybe it waits like a trap. All I know is that the quiet people are real. They move without sound. They live in the water. They take careful bites from living things. And if you ever go to Silent Waters National Park and hear screaming in the woods, do not run toward the road, do not run toward the lake, and do not trust anyone who comes back from the trees laughing. Story 5. I am not the kind of person who usually posts on sites like this, and I never thought I would be the kind of woman who asks strangers online for help. I have always kept my problems inside my own house. That was how I was raised, and after being married for so long, it became even more natural. You smile in public, you keep your voice calm, and you deal with pain behind closed doors. But I do not know what else to do anymore. I do not know who to call. I do not know who would believe me. And I am afraid that if I tell the wrong person, they will come here and take Terry away from me. I just celebrated my 36th wedding anniversary with my husband, Terry. He took me to Ruby's, the same restaurant where we had our first date all those years ago. We sat at a small table near the window, just like we did back then. We ordered steaks, shared wine, laughed about things only the two of us remembered, and for a few hours I felt young again. Later we came home and made love slowly and sweetly, the way people do when they know each other so well that every touch feels like an old memory. It should have been one of the happiest nights of my life. In some ways, I suppose it was. Everything was perfect. Except for one thing. Terry had died 3 days earlier. I know how that sounds. I know what you are probably thinking. You are probably wondering if I'm confused or grieving too hard or maybe losing my mind. I have wondered the same things myself. But Terry did die. I am sure of it. I found him with my own eyes. I touched him with my own hands. I felt the coldness of his skin. I checked for his heartbeat. I listened for his breathing. There was nothing there. No life, no warmth, no movement, nothing. Terry had always been a deep sleeper. Even when we were young, it was hard to wake him once he was truly asleep. I used to joke that a tornado could lift the roof off our house and he would only roll over and ask for 5 more minutes. About 5 years ago, he started using a CPAP machine because his sleep had gotten worse. He had obstructive sleep apnea, and the doctor explained that his airway could get blocked when he lay down. Sometimes he would stop breathing for short moments in the night. The machine helped force air through the tubing and into his mask so he could breathe properly while he slept. I did not like the machine at first. It was loud, and the mask left marks on his face, and it made him look older and sicker than I wanted to admit. But after a while, the sound became part of our bedroom, a low, steady roaring, a strange kind of comfort. That morning started like any other morning. Since it was our anniversary, I woke up early and tried not to disturb him. I moved carefully out of bed, went to the kitchen, made coffee, and then went into the bathroom to shower and get ready for work. Terry usually slept late on Wednesdays, so I did not think it was strange when he did not move as I got up. I closed the bathroom door, turned on the shower, and thought about the evening ahead. We had already planned to go to Ruby's. I had even laid out a nice dress the night before. Nothing about the morning felt wrong at first. It was not until I got out of the shower and walked back through the bedroom that something began to feel strange. Terry usually had a small routine. He would take off his CPAP mask after my alarm, lie there for a few more minutes while I showered, and by the time I came out, I would tease him until he got up. Sometimes I would bring him coffee. Sometimes I would tap his foot and tell him the day would not wait forever. It was one of those little married routines that probably sounds boring to other people, but feels like home when it belongs to you. That morning, I came out with one towel wrapped around my wet hair and another around my body. I smiled and said, "Happy anniversary, sweetheart. I made coffee." He did not move. His CPAP mask was still on his face. At first, I thought he was just sleeping deeply. Then, I noticed how quiet the room was. The CPAP machine was not making its normal sound. That low roar I had gotten so used to was gone. It was not that I had stopped hearing it. It was absent. The room felt empty without it, in a way that made my chest tighten before I even understood why. I walked closer. "Terry," I said. He did not answer. Both of my hands were busy holding the towels in place, so I bumped his foot gently with my bare leg, the way I had done 1,000 times before when I wanted him to wake up. His foot was ice cold and stiff. I remember the feeling of that cold going through me, from my leg up into my stomach. I stood there for a second, unable to understand it. Then I said his name again, louder this time. "Terry, babe, are you okay?" But he was not okay. I dropped one towel without meaning to and reached for him. I had to pry the mask from his face. It had stuck strangely against his skin, and for one terrible moment I thought it did not want to come off. I lifted him as much as I could in the bed, pressed my hand to his chest, then to his neck, then leaned close to listen for breathing. There was no heartbeat, no breath. His eyes were closed, thank God, but his face had already started to turn a strange bluish purple. It was a sight I wish I could tear out of my memory. His face was the worst part. Along his cheeks were red marks where the mask had been, but some of the marks did not look like simple pressure marks. They looked like scratches, like he had tried to claw the mask off but couldn't. I was so shocked I did not scream. I did not call anyone. I did not even move for what felt like hours, though it must have only been a few minutes. My wet hair dripped down my neck. The towel around my body loosened and nearly fell. I kept staring at Terry's face, waiting for him to open his eyes, waiting for him to take one ugly, gasping breath, and make the whole thing a mistake. But he did not. The strangest part is that I do not remember crying. I know I must have cried later. A person should cry when she finds her husband dead beside her. But in that moment, there was nothing. Just a blank space inside me. It was like my mind stepped away from the room and left my body standing there alone. I know this is the part where you will judge me. I have already judged myself enough, so there is nothing you can say that I have not said in my own head. I left him there in the bed and went to work. I did not know what else to do. That is the only explanation I have. I was not thinking clearly. I was not thinking like a wife or a reasonable adult or even a decent person. I was just moving. I knew I could not lift him by myself. I could not fix anything. I could not make him alive again. So I wrapped him in the covers he was lying on, like that somehow made it less real, and I shut the bedroom door. Then I got dressed, got in my car, and drove to the library. I must have been in shock. That is what I tell myself now. It is the only thing that makes any sense. When I arrived, Melanie's car was already there, along with a few other cars belonging to part-time staff. Some of them were standing near the entrance because they did not have keys to open the building. I parked, got out, and let them in like it was any normal morning. I even said good morning. I remember hearing my own voice and being surprised by how normal it sounded. The library was still dim inside. Morning light came through the tall front windows, pale and soft. I headed towards circulation, where my office is, moving almost automatically. Then I turned the corner and saw Melanie standing frozen in the lobby. She was facing the mirrored stairway in the center of the building. The library had this large, mirrored wall near the stairs, made of dark, reflective material that almost looked black, unless the light hit it right. I had walked past it thousands of times without thinking much about it. It was just part of the building. Melanie, though, was staring at it like she had seen something impossible. When she noticed me, she snapped back to her usual smile and waved. I waved back. She said nothing. She just turned and walked up the stairs quickly, like she had suddenly remembered somewhere she needed to be. I looked at the mirror after she left. I had crossed the lobby and stood near the main light switches by the stairs. My reflection stared back at me, pale and tired. I looked older than I had the day before. My eyes were dark underneath. My face seemed loose, like grief had already started pulling at it, even though I had not let myself feel it yet. I remember noticing the mirror itself. I had never realized how dark and smoky the material was. It had a strange beauty to it, almost like polished obsidian. Something about it made me step closer. Then, I saw movement behind me. At first, I thought it was one of the part-timers coming into the lobby. I turned around quickly. Nobody was there. Voices carried faintly from the break room, far away. The lobby behind me was empty. I turned back to the mirror. Terry was standing right behind me. I cannot explain what I felt in that moment. Fear, yes, but not only fear. Relief, too. A terrible, desperate relief that moved through me so fast it almost knocked the air out of my lungs. My husband was dead at home, wrapped in sheets behind a closed bedroom door. I knew that. I knew it with the same certainty I know my own name. And yet there he was in the mirror, standing behind me with that familiar face, those kind eyes, that gentle way of holding himself. I did not turn around. Some part of me already knew he would not be there if I looked. The mirror was the only place he existed. So I did something that still surprises me. I reached out and touched the mirror. My fingers brushed against the cool, dark surface. For a moment, nothing happened. It was just glass, cold and smooth under my hand. Then I felt something pressing back from the other side. At first, it was soft, gentle, like fingertips meeting mine through a thin sheet of water. Then the pressure grew stronger. The mirror's surface did not break exactly. It moved. It bent outward like something thick and dark was being pushed through from another place. Fingertips came first, then a hand, an arm, a shoulder, then a head. Terry's head. The rest of him followed. I backed away, one hand over my mouth, and watched my husband step out of the mirror into the library lobby. He looked exactly like himself, not like the body I had left at home. Not blue or cold or stiff. He looked alive. A little pale, maybe, but alive. He wore the same soft smile he had given me the first time we met. In this very building, actually, that was where we had first spoken, long before our first date at Ruby's. He smiled at me, and for a moment all the horror of that morning disappeared. Then Tanya came around the corner. She stopped only briefly and smiled at both of us like nothing was strange. "Hey, Dusty," she called. "Aw, that's sweet that Terry came with you today. Happy anniversary, you two." She looked at Terry and laughed. "Great to see you, Terry. How's the tomato crop this year?" Terry smiled his normal smile. Then he waved. At least, I think he waved. His hand moved, but not quite right. It was small, stiff, almost delayed. Tanya waved back and went around the desk without another thought. I stood there stunned. She had seen him. He was not only in my head, he was not just a reflection. He was standing there in the building, and someone else had seen him too. But Terry did not speak. He did not move his mouth. He did not answer Tanya's question. He just stood beside me, smiling. I grabbed his hand. It felt warm enough, real enough. I led him out of the library, across the parking lot, and into my... He followed without resistance. He sat in the passenger seat and looked straight ahead while I drove away. I called my boss from the car and told her I was sick. My voice shook, but she seemed to believe me. Maybe she thought I was upset because it was my anniversary and I was not feeling well. Maybe she had no idea what was really happening. How could she? When we got home, the other Terry was still the dead one, wrapped in those sheets on the bed, except something was already wrong. The smell was unbearable. I do not know how it happened so quickly, but the bedroom smelled like rotten meat and sour milk. It hit me the moment I opened the door, and I gagged so hard I nearly fell backward. The Terry from the mirror stood behind me, silent and smiling. I asked him to help me move the other Terry into the closet so he would not stink up the whole house. I know how horrible that sounds. I know. Please understand that I was not thinking like a normal person. I had my husband standing next to me. My husband, warm and smiling, and somehow returned to me. What was I supposed to do? Call the police and say, "My dead husband is in the bedroom, but another version of him just came out of a mirror at the library, and I would like to keep that one?" They would have locked me away or taken him from me. Maybe both. So we moved the body. It was terrible. The weight of him. The stiffness. The smell. I kept my face turned away and tried not to think about the fact that the man in the sheets was also Terry. My Terry. The same hands that had held mine. The same face that had kissed me goodnight for 36 years. I told myself the one helping me was the real one now. The body was only an empty shell. That was the only way I could do it. The Terry who came from the mirror still did not speak. But he had the same kind eyes. He had the same smile. When I started crying in the hallway, he reached for my shoulder and rested his hand there. It was not perfect. The gesture felt a little too slow, like he was remembering how comfort worked. But I wanted to believe. I needed to. That night, we got dressed and celebrated our anniversary like we had planned. We went to Ruby's. He sat across from me in the same booth where we had our first date. I ordered for both of us because he would not speak. The waitress seemed to think he was just quiet. He smiled when she asked how we were doing. I talked too much because silence made me nervous. I told old stories. I reminded him of our first date, of the way he had spilled water on the table and turned red with embarrassment. I laughed and cried into my wine. He watched me the whole time with that steady smile. And later, when we came home, I pretended the smell in the hallway was not there. I pretended everything was a miracle. For a little while, I think I believed it. That was 3 days. I have not been back to work since. At first, I ignored the calls. Then the messages started piling up. Melanie called twice. Tanya left a voicemail asking if everything was okay. My boss called and sounded worried. There was one call from an unknown number that I did not answer. I knew people would start asking questions soon, but I could not make myself care. Terry was here. That was the only thing that mattered. Then I read the news about Bobby. Bobby worked at the library too. He was quiet, a little strange sometimes, but harmless. The article said he had been found inside an air duct on the 3rd floor of the library after other staff heard noises in the walls. They said he had dug out his own eyes. They said he had carved the words "AREU" scared into his chest before they found him. He was alive, but barely. He had been taken to the state mental hospital for observation. According to the article, he had been muttering something about mirrors. The news loved it, of course. They made it into a gruesome local mystery. They showed footage of the library from outside with police tape across one entrance. They interviewed people who had never even spoken to Bobby, but were happy to say he had always seemed off. They talked about mental health and stress and possible drug use. No one mentioned the mirror in the stairway. No one mentioned Terry. No one mentioned what I saw. But management contacted the police. There is some kind of investigation now. I do not know if they know I left work that morning with Terry. I do not know if Tanya told them she saw him. I do not know if the cameras caught any. I keep thinking about the mirror, about Terry stepping out of it, about how calm he looked. I keep thinking about Melanie standing frozen in the lobby before I even walked over there. What did she see? Did she see Terry in the mirror before I did? Did she see something else waiting behind him? I keep thinking about Bobby in the air duct, blind and bleeding, whispering about mirrors. Jesus, I do not know what to do. I cannot bring myself to open the closet. The smell has gotten worse. I put towels under the bedroom door, then under the closet door. I sprayed cleaner until the air burned my throat. None of it helps for long. The smell still finds its way out. Sweet, rotten, heavy, the smell of the truth. But I cannot call anyone. I cannot lose Terry again. I won't. The problem is, I think something is wrong with the one who came back. At first, he was gentle. Quiet, but gentle. He followed me from room to room. He watched me cook. He sat with me on the couch. He smiled when I spoke to him. He let me touch his face, his hands, his chest. His skin was warm, but not always the same warm. Sometimes it felt almost feverish. Other times it felt cool and damp like glass after rain. He still cannot speak. Or maybe he will not. I do not know which is worse. Sometimes he opens his mouth like he is trying to form words, but nothing comes out except a soft clicking sound from the back of his throat. When that happens, his smile slips. Not much. Just enough to show something underneath it. Confusion, anger, hunger, I do not know. Yesterday afternoon, I found him standing in front of the hallway mirror. He was not looking at himself. He was looking past himself, into the reflection of the room behind him. His hands were pressed flat against the glass. When I said his name, he turned his head too quickly, and for 1 second his smile was gone. His face looked blank and wrong, like a mask no one was wearing. Then he smiled again. My Terry smile. The one I keep trusting, even though I know I should not. I told him to stay in the guest room until I could figure out what to do. I said it gently. I told him I loved him. I told him I just needed time. He went inside without fighting me, but he stood in the middle of the room staring at me until I closed the door. That was a few hours ago. Since the sun went down, he has been banging on the wall. Bang, 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 not fast. Not wild, just steady. Like he is testing the room, like he is trying to learn how strong the walls are. Every now and then it stops. When it does, I hear something worse. A soft scraping sound, low to the floor. Then that clicking noise from his throat. Once, just once, I heard him whisper. It was not Terry's voice. It was too deep, too dry, like someone speaking through a mouth that did not belong to them. He said, Dusty, I have locked myself in the kitchen with my laptop. I pushed a chair under the door handle, even though I know that probably will not help. The police may already be on their way. Maybe my boss sent them. Maybe the unknown number was a detective. Maybe they will knock on the front door any minute. And when they do, I will have to explain the closet, the smell, the missing days, Terry, and the thing in the guest room. I should be hoping for that. Instead, I am terrified. Because I am not only afraid they will take Terry away, I am afraid they will bring mirrors with them. The banging has stopped now. The house is completely quiet except for the refrigerator humming and my own breathing. I can see the dark kitchen window from where I am sitting. It is night outside, so the glass has turned reflective. I can see myself in it. My pale face, my messy hair, my hands shaking over the keyboard, and behind my reflection, in the dark shape of the hallway, I can see Terry standing outside the kitchen door. But I have not heard the guest room door open. I do not want to turn around. I do not want to look away from the screen, because in the window he is smiling, and behind him, deeper in the reflection, there are others, tall shapes, thin shapes, pressed close together like people waiting their turn. I think something else came back through that mirror with my husband, and I think it has been waiting 36 years for me to invite it home. Story 6 It All started in the winter of 2025, right in the middle of downtown Chicago. At the time, I was living on the 11th floor of a huge modern high-rise, the kind of building that looks safe from the outside because everything is shiny, expensive, and controlled by technology. There were security cameras in every hallway, digital keycards for every entrance, key fobs for the elevators, and a front desk that was always supposed to have someone watching. The lobby smelled like polished stone and expensive air freshener. The elevators had mirrors on 3 sides and moved so quietly that sometimes it felt like you were floating instead of rising. From my apartment window, I could see traffic crawling between the buildings below, little red and white lights sliding through the streets all night. It should have felt secure. It should have felt private. But the truth was, nobody in that building really knew each other. People avoided eye contact in the elevator. They walked their dogs with earbuds in. They picked up packages without speaking. Everyone lived behind locked doors, sealed inside their own little world. That kind of life suited me at first. I worked from home as a data analyst for a tech company, and most of my days were quiet, predictable, and honestly a little lonely. I would wake up, make coffee, sit at my desk, and spend hours staring at numbers on a screen. My job did not require me to go into an office, and after a while, I stopped forcing myself to leave the apartment unless I absolutely had to. I told myself I was saving time. I told myself I was more productive this way. But really, I had slowly built a life where I barely had to interact with anyone. I ordered almost everything through delivery apps: food, groceries, toiletries, batteries, medicine, even laundry detergent. If I needed it, someone could bring it to my door. Most of the time, I never saw the delivery drivers. They would leave the bag outside, take a picture, and disappear before I opened the door. That was normal. That was the whole point of contactless delivery. In early November, I started noticing something strange. It was small at first, so small that I almost ignored it. Every time I ordered food late at night, especially after 1 in the morning, the plastic bag would have a tiny round hole in it. Not a tear, not a rip from carrying it. A clean, perfect little circle. It looked like someone had pushed a thick needle or some kind of small metal probe through the plastic and into the bag. The first time I saw it, I thought the restaurant had done it by accident. Maybe the bag had been hanging on some hook or caught on something in the delivery car. The second time, I thought it was weird, but still not scary. By the fourth or fifth time, I started looking for it before I even opened the bag. The holes were always there, always perfectly round, always near the top, angled toward whatever was inside. At first, it only happened with hot food. Burgers, noodles, tacos, sandwiches. I wondered if maybe some delivery drivers were checking the order in a gross way, poking through the bag to make sure the containers were there. I complained once through the app, but nothing came of it. Then, it started happening with grocery deliveries, too. That was harder to explain. I would order sealed, canned goods, boxes of cereal, bottled drinks, and the grocery bag would still arrive with that same tiny hole. One night, I ordered only canned soup and a pack of paper towels. The bag still had the hole. It was right above the soup cans, as if someone had pushed something through the plastic to touch them. I told myself I was being paranoid. I was tired, isolated, and working strange hours. When you live alone and spend too much time indoors, your mind can start turning small things into patterns. I knew that. I even laughed at myself once, standing in my kitchen at 2 in the morning, holding up a bag like a detective looking for evidence. But deep down, the holes bothered me. They felt intentional. They felt like a message I did not understand yet. On the night of November 12th, everything changed. It was late, and I had been working longer than usual because a report was due the next morning. I remember the blue glow of my monitor, the empty coffee mug beside my keyboard, and the headache pressing behind my eyes. At around 2 in the morning, I ordered a burger and fries because I had forgotten to eat dinner. The app said the driver was nearby at 2:35. At exactly 2:40 a.m., my phone buzzed. Order delivered. I stood up from my desk and walked toward the door. My apartment was dark except for the light coming from my work setup behind me. I remember feeling annoyed more than anything. I just wanted to eat and sleep. But the moment my hand touched the door handle, I heard something from the other side. It was not footsteps walking away. It was breathing. Heavy, rough breathing. Close enough that it sounded like someone's mouth was only inches from the door. I froze with my hand still on the handle. Then I heard another sound, slow and sickening. A dragging, rubbing sound, like someone was pressing their back against my wooden apartment door and sliding slightly against it. Up, down, side to side. Very slowly, very deliberately. I stepped back so fast my heel hit the wall behind me. For a few seconds, I did not breathe. I just stood there, listening. The sound continued. Breath, rub, breath, rub. My heart started beating so hard that I could feel it in my throat. I crept forward again, moving as quietly as I could, and leaned toward the peephole. The hallway was almost completely dark. The smart motion lights were off, which was strange because they were supposed to turn on whenever someone moved through the corridor. The only light came from the emergency exit sign at the far end of the hall. It flickered faintly, washing everything in a weak red glow. In that dim light, I saw a man's broad back pressed flat against my door. He was wearing a red delivery, the kind I had seen dozens of times before through the peephole, on drivers dropping off food. But he was standing wrong. His body was too close, his shoulders spread against my door like he was trying to feel me through the wood. His head was tilted back at an angle that looked painful, almost broken, and he was whispering something. It was fast and rhythmic. I could not understand the words, but it sounded like a chant. Then he spun around, not quickly. Slowly, his face appeared in the peephole, and I almost screamed. He was not wearing a mask. He did not look like a monster. That somehow made it worse. His face was ordinary, the face of a man you might pass in a store and forget. Dark hair, rough skin, a little stubble around his mouth, but his eyes were wide open, stretched into a dead, terrifying stare. They did not blink. They did not move. Under his nose, there was a thin, dried streak of dark blood running down toward his upper lip. He looked directly into the peephole, straight into my eye. Not like he was guessing I was there, like he knew exactly where I was standing. Then he raised one hand. His index finger pressed against my doorbell. The bell rang through my apartment, loud and sharp. He held it down. One long, continuous ring. It did not stop. It filled every room, bouncing off the walls, cutting through the silence. I backed away with my hands over my mouth, but the ringing kept going. 10 seconds. 20, 30, my phone vibrated in my shaking hand. A text message from an unknown number appeared on the screen. The dinner is cold inside, but we are warm out here. I stared at those words while the doorbell screamed through the apartment. My hands were shaking so badly that the letters blurred. The ringing continued for what felt like forever, then finally stopped. On the other side of the door, I heard quick, light footsteps running toward the emergency stairwell. They sounded wrong, too. Too fast, too soft, like a child running barefoot. I waited several minutes before moving. Even then, I did not open the door right away. I stood at the peephole, staring into the dark hallway, trying to see if anyone was still there. The motion lights never came on. Finally, I opened the door only an inch, just enough to reach out and grab the delivery bag. The hole in the plastic was bigger this time. It was large enough to slide a finger through. I locked the door again and took the bag into the kitchen. My appetite was gone, but some terrible need to know forced me to open it. Inside was the burger container, still warm but slightly crushed. I lifted the lid. A small piece of grease-stained notebook paper was resting on top of the food. The writing was messy, shaky, and dark, as if the pen had been pressed too hard into the paper. Apartment 1104 is very cozy, especially from the angle of the air vents. I felt panic hit me so hard that I had to grip the counter to stay standing. My apartment number was 1104. That was not something a random delivery driver should care about. The air vents were in my living room, bedroom, and bathroom. I looked up at the nearest vent above the kitchen doorway and felt the whole apartment change around me. The place that had felt private a few minutes before suddenly felt open, exposed, watched. I did not sleep that night. The next morning, as soon as the management office opened, I went downstairs. I probably looked insane. I had not changed clothes. My eyes were bloodshot. I was holding the note in a plastic sandwich bag because some part of my brain had gone into crime scene mode. I demanded that the building security guard review the hallway footage from the 11th floor. At first, he looked irritated, like I was another tenant, complaining about stolen food or noisy neighbors. Then I showed him the note. His expression changed. We sat together in the security office and pulled up the footage from the night before. The hallway camera on my floor showed the elevator doors opening at 2:38 a.m. A delivery driver stepped out holding my bag. He looked normal, tired, maybe. He walked down the hall to my door, placed the bag on the floor, took the delivery photo, and turned to leave. For 1 second, I thought maybe the footage would prove I had imagined everything. Then, right before the driver reached the elevator, The door to apartment 1105 opened. Apartment 1105 was directly across from mine. I knew an elderly man lived there, bedridden, according to one of the maintenance workers I had spoken to months earlier. I had never met him. I had never seen him leave. Sometimes I heard a television through the wall, low and muffled, but that was all. The person who stepped out of 1105 was not an elderly man. He was massive, tall and wide, with thick arms and a heavy stomach. He was wearing filthy medical scrubs stained with dark patches. He moved with sudden speed. In one motion, he grabbed the delivery driver by the throat and dragged him into apartment 1105. The driver kicked once. The door slammed shut. The security guard and I sat Exactly 2 minutes later, the door opened again. The massive man stepped out wearing the driver's red delivery jacket. He walked straight to my door, turned around, and pressed his back flat against it. Just like I had seen through the peephole, my whole body went cold. The security guard was pale. He did not tell me to calm down. He did not try to explain it away. He simply reached for the phone and called the police. When SWAT arrived, the hallway filled with shouting, radios, and heavy boots. I stood near the elevator with a blanket around my shoulders while officers aimed weapons at the door across from mine. They kicked it in and rushed inside. Apartment 1105 was almost completely empty. No furniture, no bed, no curtains, no dishes. Dust covered the floor in thick layers, except for paths where people had clearly been walking. The smell reached the hallway almost immediately, sweet and rotten and chemical at the same time. The real owner of the apartment, the old man, was found in the bathtub. He had been dead for weeks. His body had been packed under heavy layers of industrial salt, like someone had been trying to preserve. But the living room was what broke me. There was a full surveillance setup inside, small monitors, receivers, wires, batteries, recording equipment. The screens showed different angles of my apartment, my living room, my kitchen, my desk, my bed, even part of my bathroom sink. The police later found wireless spy cameras hidden deep inside my air vents. They had been watching me from across the hall for months. They knew when I slept. They knew when I showered. They knew what I ate, what I wore, when I worked, and what I scrolled through on my phone. They knew everything, and it got worse. Behind the drywall, near the shared structural wall between our apartments, someone had carved a narrow tunnel. It ran behind the ACK vent system, just wide enough for a thin person to squeeze through. The thought of someone sliding through that hidden space while I sat at my desk or slept in my bed made me feel like my skin did not belong on my body anymore. I could not stay, not for one more minute. I packed a small duffel bag with my ID, laptop, chargers, some clothes, and a few things I could not replace. I left almost everything else behind. Furniture, books, dishes, clothes, photos, all of it. I did not care. The apartment was not mine anymore. It had not been mine for a long time. I checked into a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city using a fake name. The room was ugly and smelled like smoke trapped under cleaning spray, but it had a bed, a lock, and no air vents I could easily see from the door. For the first time in days, I thought I might be able to breathe. I told myself the police were handling it. I told myself the man in the delivery jacket had probably run, but they would. The cameras, the dead tenant, the tunnel, the murdered driver, all of that was too big to disappear. Someone would be caught. Someone had to be caught. By the fourth night, I was lying in the motel bed with my laptop open, searching for updates. I typed every version of the story I could think of. Chicago high-rise body. Delivery driver missing. Apartment surveillance. Dead man found in bath. Almost nothing came up. The media had stayed quiet. There was only one small article buried on a local news site about the body of a delivery driver found in the city's sewer lines. No mention of my building. No mention of 11:05. No mention of the cameras. At exactly 1:15 a.m., my phone chimed. It was a sound I knew instantly. Uber Eats notification. Your driver is on. My heart dropped so hard it felt like my body forgot how to breathe. I had not opened that app since the night everything happened. I had not ordered anything. I grabbed the phone and opened it with shaking fingers. There was an active order running under my account. My account had been hacked. The drop-off address was not my old apartment. It was the exact address of my motel. My room number was written perfectly in the driver notes. For a few seconds, I could not move. The motel room felt like it was shrinking around me. Then I looked toward the door. The gap under it showed a strip of yellow light from the outdoor walkway. As I watched, that light disappeared. A shadow covered it. 2 large feet stood outside my door. There had been no footsteps, no sound on the gravel, no car pulling up. Whoever was outside had arrived in complete silence. Then, something slid under the door. A small, folded piece of paper scraped across the carpet and stopped just inside the room. My eyes filled with tears before I even touched it. I crawled toward it because my legs were too weak to stand. When I unfolded it, I saw a printed screenshot of my own phone screen. It was a live image taken days before from one of the spy cameras in my apartment. Across it, in thick red ink, someone had written, "Changing hotels doesn't change the fact that you always order the same thing. Open up, we're hungry too." I do not remember how I got out of that room. I know I climbed through the bathroom window. I know I ran until my lungs burned. I know I left the duffel bag behind. The investigation is still open. The FBI believes it may be connected to an organized dark web group that targets isolated people living alone. That is what they told me, anyway. I move every 48 hours now. I use burner phones, cache, fake names, and encrypted VPNs whenever I post anything online. I never order food. I do not stay anywhere long enough to feel safe. But no matter where I go, I keep finding the same thing. A tiny, perfectly round hole drilled into the corner of a ceiling tile. A bathroom vent that looks just slightly out of place. A small, dark circle in a plastic bag I did not bring inside. And when the room gets quiet enough, when the traffic outside dies down and the air conditioner stops humming, a heavy, raspy breathing from the other side of the wall, waiting for me to fall asleep.